Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Womb to Tomb Apologetics. Today, we're going to do one of my first videos that is actually dedicated to persuasion and persuasion theory and how we influence other people to come to our point of view on different matters. Now, today we're going to be reviewing a pro-lifer's video. Actually, technically, he calls himself an abolitionist, which is sort of a different thing, but that's not super relevant for today. His name is Hayden and he is making the rounds on YouTube. I don't remember how many subscribers he has, but it's quite the significant amount, and he is influencing a lot of people to see his point of view on things, or at least that's what he's trying to do. I just looked it up. He's got 88.3 thousand subscribers, so he's pretty big, and he's getting bigger by the day. But I noticed some things as I was going through some of his videos, and I noticed that he could be a lot more persuasive than he is. So today we're going to go through two of his videos, and I'm going to break down for you some of the things that I find a little bit problematic with his methods. It's not that he's that we're on different sides of the issue or anything like that. I agree with him. I'm on his side, but his methods are less than helpful, and the two cases we're going to look at today are perfect for showing that. He does not change minds as effectively as he might like to, and Hayden, if you're watching this, again, no ill will toward you, but we're just going to go over some of the things that he could do to be more persuasive. So today you're going to learn about the cutting edge persuasion theory and powerful methods and techniques that you can instantly try in order to change people's minds. So this could be the difference between winning hearts and minds on abortion or any other topic. Of course, if you're not pro-life or abolitionist, maybe you're pro-choice or whatever, you'll still find value in this video. So stay tuned. And just before we begin, if you want to support me, you can support me at buymeacoffee.com or consider subscribing if you find this valuable. All right, let's get into his first video. This is one of his most popular.
Taylor.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying my name. Hey,
Oh.
Yeah, good to meet you. Yeah, so what's your position on abortion?
All right. Well, quite frankly, I'm going to be honest. I don't think this is any of your business. All right. I've been wanting to talk to you one of you guys for a really, really long time. I don't know if you're going to upload me on my YouTube. I don't know what channel I'm going to be on. If I'm on YouTube, hi. If you decide to remove me, whatever. But quite frankly, this is none of your business. You're on nobody's side right now, other than a couple of guys who already are anti-abortion. Right now, you're just making everybody on campus hate you.
Okay, so he started off well. He introduced himself. He said hi. There's a little bit of miscommunication, but he was smiling at least a little bit there, building a little bit of rapport. And so at the beginning of these sorts of encounters, what you want to do is build rapport. And you want to ask good questions, which is something that he needs a little help with. And we'll talk about a little bit of what he could be doing in some of these encounters. But what does she start with? She starts off by expressing her dislike for him, her thought that this isn't any of his business, that he's not winning people over. Now, as you'll see near the end of this video, that could just be her way of demeaning him and trying to ruin his self-esteem so he doesn't come back. But I actually find myself agreeing with her the more I watch some of his videos. Again, I'm not saying that this is completely representative of every video he's done. I haven't watched all of them, but he does have trouble winning hearts and minds on some of these things, and we'll get into that. But anyway, that's how she starts. What you would want to do at this point is start by asking her about why she feels that way, kind of getting this off the table, because she has an agenda here, which is, I want to communicate something to this guy, and he's not going to address that. And what he needs to do is get that off the table so that he can get to the issue that he wants to talk about.
There's not a single person you are getting on your side. Okay, personal beliefs aside, you are not getting anybody on your side by saying everybody's who's had an abortion is evil. Do you understand? This is terrible. You're making women feel awful. If there's somebody on campus who's had an abortion, they're hating themselves right now because of you. This is not okay. You are on nobody's side right now, other than like a couple of guys, like a couple of conservative guys who, like, I'm not even gonna like try to debate you about like your personal beliefs. Everybody on campus right now hates you.
So here, again, she's already talked about she's not here to debate him. That's unfortunate for her because that's exactly what his agenda is. So if he wants to get onto that agenda, he needs to move this off the plate instead of just ignoring it, because as we're about to see, he's going to bulldoze through that, get onto his agenda, and a few more minutes into this, she's just going to dismiss everything he's just said. He's going to go on a big monologue. She's going to dismiss it and come right back to her point. She's going to say, that was a bunch of nothing. Anyway, here's the deal. You're not convincing anyone. Right? Okay, you see how that works? You need to get this off the table.
Do you understand?
Yeah, so just real quick. First of all, I'd say the truth sounds like hate to those who hate truth. I also want to point out.
Okay, so he starts off with a quip. The truth sounds bad to people who hate truth. Now, that's true, but he has immediately began by dismissing her concerns. So this is a pattern you're going to see throughout this video. And again, he's very right about what he says, but he's very bad at persuading people. So that's a problem that we're going to see kind of as this video progresses a little bit. Let me adjust myself here. Should I put myself like this? There we go. Maybe that's a little better. Anyway, we'll get back to the video. All right.
You said that it's none of my business, but what happens to my neighbors is my business. When my neighbors in the womb are being murdered by the millions, that is my business. And I'd also point out the same argument that you're saying that it's not my business is a very similar argument that those who were in the North in the early 1800s in the United States made against slavery. They said, the plantation owners all said, it's none of your business what I do with my property. Now, they were wrong because humans are not property. They are humans who are made in the image of God and are valuable and have a right to liberty even when the state doesn't recognize it. So you're saying it's none of my business, presumably because I don't have a uterus. But I'd point out, you don't own a plantation, yet you can still say slavery is wrong. What do you think?
So he makes a good point. That's an accurate point. But if you paid attention to her expression, it started to change partway through what he was saying. And you can tell that she didn't understand a word of what he was talking about. So this is another important part of persuasion. Pay attention to body language and expressions of your counterpart, not just word choice. That's going to help you figure out whether this person's tracking along what you're saying or not. That's very important because the whole point of persuading people is to communicate something to them. If they don't know what you're communicating, you're not persuading them. You're not gaining ground. But I'll tell you a much better analogy that pro-lifers and abolitionists can use in place of this slavery analogy. This is a very, 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 very common one. If you ever talked with a pro-lifer before, they bring up the slavery analogy all the time, right? I'm going to give you a much better one, but we're going to wait for that. Let's just keep going because it'll come back up. But the other analogy will make a big impact, and you can use it in your conversations when you talk with pro-choicers. All right.
None of what you said has anything to do with what I said, and this is like a really common, I guess, like Ben Shapiro like sort of thing with you type of guys. I'm not even gonna acknowledge that. I forgot what that like sort of argument that's called. I don't know. I don't remember, but like I know this is a common thing for you guys to just go widely off topic. You are on nobody's side right now. You're not getting like anybody on your side by calling me a slave owner.
I never called you a slave owner. I said you're making.
Okay. So again, as I predicted, she clearly is not catching on. Now, part of that is probably because, I'm sorry to say, she probably doesn't have a lot of experience thinking for herself, instead of just parroting what other people tell her. But that's why it's important to ask questions, to use questions with people. She'll be able to track things much better. So this is another tip for you. Use questions instead of statements. He went on a big monologue that had nothing to do with what she wanted to talk about. Again, he needs to get this off the table. Do you notice how she just dismissed everything he said, went right back into her spiel? You're not doing anything for anybody. You're not impressing anybody. You're not persuading anybody. You should just pack up and go home. Right? That's basically her idea. He might make better ground if he asked questions. Put this into a form of question. Well, you say I shouldn't be speaking on this. It's not my business. Do you think that that's a good rule generally? I mean, do you think that if someone is being hurt unjustly, that people shouldn't speak up? What do you think about that? Well, the answer to that is, well, no, they should do something. Well, if it's true, if what I think about this issue is true, then that means that they're innocent children, right? And you might not think this, but from my perspective, there are innocent children being hurt. And I think that is my business. Now, you might have a different perspective, and I'm happy to hear that out. But I want to know a little bit more about what you think on this issue, because I don't think this is a matter of, oh, it's not my business, right? So you might say something kind of like that again. It's not perfect, but just sort of off the cuff. That's what I thought of. So I will note, however, that you should try to maintain control of the conversation. Don't let people get off track. That's another thing you have to balance. So you kind of have to balance talking about what the other person wants to talk about with keeping the conversation on track. A lot of the time with pro-choicers, they will bring the conversation off into all sorts of things that have really nothing to do with the actual issue at hand. What about poor women? What about if she's been attacked? Or what if, what about this? What about that? All these whataboutisms, right? That don't focus on the central issue, which is usually something like, what are the preborn? Are they human beings like you and I? If so, maybe they deserve human rights. And if not, well then, who cares if she's poor, if she was attacked, if she was whatever? She should be able to take that life as much as she, has the right to go get her tonsils removed, I believe it's Scott Klusendorf who said something to the effect of, if what's inside the womb isn't a life, then no justification for abortion is necessary. But if what's inside the womb is a life, no justification is adequate. So that's where he should be trying to drive that conversation. However, again, you want to take things off the plate. Listen to your opponent at the very, very beginning of the conversation, because that's going to help you figure out what's important to her. That's how you persuade people. You don't persuade people by talking about what you think is important. You persuade them by talking about what they think is important. Okay? And again, it's sort of that balance, but let's see how well he does here.
Making a similar argument to those who were slave owners did. Slaveholders said, you don't own a plantation, you can't tell me what to do with my property. They said that circle around us, we can oppress other people. Right now what you're doing is you're saying, Hayden, you don't have a uterus, you can't tell women what to do with their bodies. What I'm pointing out, though, is that just like in the 1800s with slavery, the blacks were being enslaved, where northern people's the blacks who were being enslaved in the early 1800s, they, just like everyone around here, have a right to liberty. And people in the north, like you, who said it's none of my business what another person does to another person's body, you're making the same argument that slave owners did. Do you recognize that? You're saying just stay out of this?
All right. So he was kind of mixing up north and south there. It was a little off track. That's fine. He'll do that a few more times. But let's pay attention to the substance. So he did a good summary there. However, I'll point out his unhelpful use of language. So at one point he says, the blacks. Now, again, she's not very bright, and she clearly cares a lot more about identity politics than the truth. But and he might have been perfectly in the right for using that phrase, but again, that wasn't helpful. And what we're trying to do is be helpful in progressing this toward changing her mind. Now, it is objectively okay to say the blacks. You can say the whites, the Asians, whatever. Pick whichever, whatever. The fill in the blanks, right? Okay, that's totally fine. There's nothing offensive about that. There's nothing wrong with that. Anybody who disagrees with that is just wrong. However, if it isn't necessary and your counterpart is going to make a fuss about it, avoid saying things like that. You'll notice this in the next video. He'll do the same thing. He'll throw in something that is the most it will do is irritate your opponent. At best, they'll just kind of ignore it, whatever. At most, it's going to irritate your opponent. It's not going to help you change their minds. He's losing rapport by doing this.
Again, early in the conversation, you said it's none of your business. But when my neighbors are being murdered, it is my business. Just like in the early 1800s when blacks were being enslaved, it was everyone's business. Do you have any response?
Okay, I'm sorry.
You got no response, bro?
No, I
Okay, you can tell he's getting frustrated. You got no response, bro.
do have one. That's all.
All right,
That's
let's hear it.
hilarious. I'm sorry. I had to stop for a
Let's
second.
hear it.
I feel like there's a big difference between slavery and just some women getting an abortion. Sorry.
Okay. So, again, she caught basically nothing he just said.
I had to stop. That was funny. I'm sorry. No offense to you, but that was really funny. The blacks. I'm sorry. That was a bunch of nothing. I'm sorry.
Okay, that was a bunch of nothing, she just said, right? Completely dismissed everything he had to say. And part of that was because of the word he used there. Again, he just lost his audience, right? Yeah, and then he got laughed at, which was another bad thing. All right, let's talk a little bit about a better analogy that he could have used here. And I'll eventually devote a whole video to this because I think it's a really good one. But pro-lifers, a lot of the time, they'll use this slavery analogy. What you might try is maybe something a little more emotionally and intellectually connected to her, such as like a BLM analogy. So you might say, well, what do you think about, innocent people being hurt or even killed by the police? What do you think about that? Do you think that innocent, unarmed people of a particular group should be singled out as being okay for us to trample on their rights? And she'll say, obviously, well, no, I don't think that's okay. Of course not. And you might find a way, and again, with her, it might be a little difficult just because she's not good at grasping these sorts of things. But you might say something like, well, that's how I feel when, people attack the unborn, right? They're innocent. They haven't done anything wrong. They're unarmed. They're not attacking anyone. And, I think that they're, a specific group of human beings that's being, set apart, and our laws say, yeah, it's okay to infringe on the rights. It's okay to hurt them. It's okay to kill them. And maybe you don't think they're human beings like I do. That's fine. We're here to talk about that. But can you see how in the same way, you and I are on the same page on that? You might say something like that. Again, that's very informal, off the cuff, just off the top of my head. In an actual conversation, I would probably be able to phrase it a little bit better, but that would be kind of the gist of it. Instead, he goes with the slavery analogy. Now, people with low IQs, I have been told, have trouble grasping hypotheticals. So it's hard to say whether she would even be able to figure that out anyway. But that would be a much better analogy than the slavery analogy that abolitionists like him constantly use. And the reason why he's probably using the slavery analogy is, number one, because he's heard it before. It's common among people on his side of the aisle. But secondly, because he, as an abolitionist, he calls himself an abortion abolitionist. As an abolitionist, that really speaks to him. To him, the slavery abolitionists were people who stood up for what was right, even when it was difficult, even when people were making the same kinds of arguments that she's making, and stood up for what was right for a group of people who were being targeted and having their rights taken away from them. That really speaks to him. And he sees himself as one among many in the long line of people who abolished evil practices in his country. That's something that connects greatly with him on an emotional level, on an intellectual level. He sees himself as one of those people. But notice that doesn't speak to her. So that might speak to him. That doesn't make it persuasive to her. In order to persuade someone, you need to speak to the other person's concerns. So it might not be the most helpful analogy. Let's keep going.
Can I point out again and try to stay with me this time? The argument's the same. Early on in this conversation, you said it's none of my business, correct?
Okay, yes, I said it's none of your business, quite frankly.
Okay, so you said it's none of my business. Why is it none of my business when someone is being murdered?
Because it's not even your body. And
Okay.
quite frankly, like your like little slavery thing, I feel like there's a huge difference. You're ignoring like the whole, embryo isn't even a human being.
But it is a human being. If you Google when does human life begin, scientifically it'll say fertilization. You can keep laughing, but when you laugh, it doesn't make what I say untrue. What I'm saying is still true.
I'm sorry, but what you're saying is funny. I can't help it. It's like I'm in the circus right now.
So one thing he could do here again is use questions, right? Because this is a question is going to compel her to speak. That's a really important thing that you can use, is compel people to speak with questions. She doesn't want to address things. He wants to make a point, and then she just laughs at him. But if he asks her a question, she'll have to kind of respond to that. Just socially, she's going to have that in her instinctively to respond, right? So we might say something like, an embryo isn't a person, you said. What makes a person? Or an embryo isn't alive. What makes something alive? What do you think about that? And again, she probably isn't smart enough to even know how to answer a lot of those questions very deeply. So he might have to kind of guide the conversation a little bit, kind of like you might guide a child through something. And again, I don't mean to be insulting to her, but like she genuinely, I think anybody taking an objective look at this conversation can tell who the smarter person is. But again, that's going to be helpful. You're going to use questions to gather information at the beginning. You want to figure out what this person thinks, what's important to her. If he had been listening, he would have noticed her point is that he's not convincing anybody. He needs to leave. He needs to pack up. He's not helping anybody. And she's going to keep coming back to that because he hasn't addressed it.
All right, so again, you said it's none of my business. Okay. Now,
Okay.
people in the North, when slavery was going on, the people who weren't abolitionists said it's none of my business what a slaveholder in the South does to black people.
Okay.
Obviously, they're wrong, and everyone should care when human rights violations are occurring. Everyone should have cared in the early 1800s when blacks were being enslaved in America. What actually happened, though, is the people who did care were the people who were saying, no, that's not your property, that's my neighbor. It was Christian abolitionists who stood up and said, slavery is wrong because humans are made in the image of God and are not by nature property and have a right to liberty even when the state doesn't recognize it.
Christians.
Really?
Okay, so they're about to address the, it wasn't just Christians who were abolitionists. Yeah, it was. Like, factually, it was. Pretty much everybody who was an abolitionist was Christian. Maybe there were a few former slaves who weren't, maybe because they weren't really exposed to Christianity or whatever, but all of the mainstream abolitionists were Christian. That's just an established historical fact. Obviously, with her secular education, she wouldn't have learned something like that. She's learned that Christianity is evil and hateful. And in fact, in public schools, you're pretty much just taught that the most association Christianity has with slavery, as is taught in public schools, is that Christians use the Bible to to defend slavery, which is true insofar as there have always been people who call themselves Christians and then use the Bible to mean whatever they want. Just to kind of get off topic just for some second to kind of address that a little more in detail, you might be interested in something called the Slave Bible. If you want to look that up, that's basically a Bible that's been selectively edited to take out all of the anti-slavery stuff in it, which might be an interesting point to bring up to someone who says something like that. You might say, well, okay, if slavery was supported by Christianity, why is it that all the people who used the Bible to support slavery had to cut out gigantic sections of it and make what was called the Slave Bible, which they would give to slaves who were able to read and wanted to read the Bible? If they were able to read, they would give them that. Why would they have to do that? Why would they have to edit it down so much, ripping out page after page after page after page of all sorts of content that they didn't want the slaves to read about because it was so anti-slavery? Why would they do that, right? Again, notice how that's a helpful question that really illustrates what you're trying to go for. And it makes the person think deeper, right? And it also controls the conversation better because now they have to devote their thinking time to what your agenda is, right? You're still addressing their concerns, but you're doing it on your agenda, on your timeline, in the way that you want to do it. You're framing things, you're keeping control of the conversation, and that's going to be really helpful. Now let me back up just a taste. Let's see if I can.
Have a right to liberty even when the state doesn't recognize it.
Oh yeah, let's hear this part again. This is important. Listen to the language he chooses.
Neighbor, it was Christian abolitionists who stood up and said slavery is wrong because humans are made in the image of God and are not by nature property and have a right to liberty even when the state doesn't recognize it.
Okay, did you hear all the big fancy words he just used? Right, that stood up and they were not by nature property and whatever. Okay, again, if he hasn't caught on yet, this girl is not very smart. The next girl we're going to see his conversation with, she's a lot smarter. This girl is not one of them. This is not a very intelligent individual. But he's using all these big words. He's trying to sound smart. And you're going to see this throughout the videos. He constantly does this. Tries to sound smart, tries to sound really, really educated on this. And he's about to do the same thing. He's about to go on a spiel on all these Christian abolitionists that he can name. Look at me, look at how smart I am. People aren't there to hear how smart you are. People are there to connect, have a conversation. That's what you should be there to do. And he kind of has this habit of flexing in his conversations, which again, if he wants to debate, if he wants to get, I do that on my channel. If you watch some of my other live streams, which you should totally check out and subscribe for more if you find this content good, subscribe. But I have fun on the channel. We have goofy time. I'm not always here to convince people. I'm here to maybe give a presentation on something or laugh with my audience who already agrees with me on certain things. That's fine. That's okay. But that's not his purpose. His purpose is sitting down and having an actual conversation with someone. Another thing he could do is he could slow down a bit. His cadence, he's going so quickly. She can't keep up with that. People feel like they're getting lectured at. If you slow down and just ask people to think a little bit, right, you're going to be more persuasive. It makes you sound more in control of things. It makes you sound like you've got things handled. I'm talking a lot faster during this live stream because I'm trying to keep the time down. I'm trying to be valuing your time because I don't want to, we gotta get through it, right? But but again, if he slows down, that's going to be something really helpful for him. But let's see him go a little further here.
Really? Name me one abolitionist in the early 1800s in America who was not a Christian. Harriet, I can name you plenty that are Christian. William Lloyd Garrison, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass. In Britain, William Wilberforce. These are all Christians. I'm telling you, it's just true. The vast majority of people in the early 1800s who wanted to abolish slavery were Christians. That's not refutable at all. It's just factually and historically accurate.
Okay, so again, she's clearly incapable of following him here, as you can see by her facial expressions and her posture and things like that. But yeah, so she's having trouble here. But you'll notice he was talking fast. He was trying to kind of flex here. That's not going to be very helpful for her. Let's keep listening here.
Okay, can I go back to the beginning right
Go
now?
for it.
Nobody is on your side, and that's all I'm going to say. You are not making any friends. Everybody is against you. Do you understand?
I do. Can I point out one?
Okay. You see, right there she goes yet again, right? Let me just go back to the beginning. Okay, she's right back to her whole spiel. If he had addressed this earlier, he wouldn't have to keep bulldozing through it. He has to keep dismissing it and continuing because she has already expressed at the very beginning of the conversation, I'm not here to debate you. She said, I'm not here to debate you. She's here to state her point. So what he needs to do is make her feel heard.
Once again,
No.
early 1800s, Christian abolitionists, people like you would say, no one is on your side, you should just stop. But they didn't, did they? They kept fighting for their black brothers and sisters who are made in the image of God and who are not by nature property. They fought for their liberty, they fought for their freedom, they fought for their right to life. In the same way, everyone on this campus you said hates me, I probably would agree that probably most people on this campus do hate me. That doesn't mean I should stop speaking the truth, it doesn't mean I should stop fighting for human rights, it doesn't mean I should stop fighting for those who don't have a right to life that is guaranteed under law right now, who are made in the image of God and are valuable.
Okay, I'm not.
They're fighting for their black brothers and sisters who are not by nature property. Okay, she's not following you, dude. She's not following what you're saying. All
I'm
right.
not even gonna like argue with like the whole you're pro-life thing. I'm just saying, like, you're not doing anything here. Like, comparing like us to like slave owners, that's not doing a single thing. And I don't want you to interrupt, I'm sorry, but like, you're not doing a single thing right now. Look who is like,
So
the only people who are here right now are women who are against you. Like, also fellow women who are uncomfortable.
Okay, so did you hear what she just said? That was a really good point, actually. All the people here are people who are uncomfortable, women who are uncomfortable. And probably a lot of the people in that audience have had abortions. So, or at least maybe there's a possibility that they have. So when he goes here and he starts memorizing textbook things, listing out, well, Harriet Tubman, all these different people, they were Christian abolitionists, and he starts flexing all these ideas here, he's not convincing people, right? This might sound good to the YouTube audience, but it's not really sounding so good to other people. Again, we're almost finished with this one. We'll finish this up, and then we'll get into a much better conversation. But these are the sorts of things you want to be doing. Asking questions. Notice how he doesn't ask questions. He makes statements. This is not helpful.
Like, you're not doing a single thing. You're not. No. All right. You're not impressive. Like, you're not making any like law changes. Nobody's gonna see this and be like, wow, he's speaking the truth. You guys are annoying. We do not like you. You make everybody's days worse. Your pure existence is miserable. You are like a slime. We do not like you. All right? I want you to leave. And I know I can't technically make you leave because like freedom of speech or whatever, but we do not like you. We do not want you here. You can have any like belief you want, but do not call other people evil for it, especially other women.
real quick.
Okay, so to hear that, right? She called him a bunch of names, which again is probably just to discourage him, get him to move on. But even so, think about it, right? Are you going to be able to persuade people who think you're a waste of skin or whatever the heck she said, right? You need to get out of here. We don't like you. No one here likes you. Everybody hates you. If you're hated by the people listening to you, are you going to be able to persuade them? No. You need to learn to be likable. And he's not really doing that by citing a bunch of abolitionists and using all these big words. They are not by nature property. Just talk like a human being, right? That's how you persuade people. Just talk like you're on their level. Don't talk down to them.
My sign doesn't say that women who get abortions are evil. It says abortion is evil. The act of
cares?
murder is evil. If I had a sign that
Did you hear? That's not, who cares? She's just dismissing him completely. Okay.
says murder is evil, I don't think you'd be coming up here. Abortion is murder. Murder is evil. I'm not saying the women who are getting abortions are evil. I will point out they're committing evil acts when they get abortions, but I will also point out they can be forgiven from their sins if they put their faith in Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Oh boy, this is if you're okay, pay attention to this part. This is really not good. So he's bringing up Jesus and all this stuff, which is fine. That's like totally okay to do that. I don't have a problem if you find that that works. Abolitionists tend to think that that works better than pro-lifers do, because they tend to be a little more religious. They think religious arguments are good. Bring up God, bring up Jesus, bring up all that stuff. And that's great. If that works for you, that's awesome. I'm not saying that that's wrong. However, pay attention to how he ends this conversation. This is the worst part of what he does. Everything up until this point pales in comparison to this. Watch this.
Okay, we're done here. All right, it was nice meeting you, Hayden. I do not want to argue with like a Ben Shapiro wannabe, honestly. You seem like you're in your own sort of like circle. I wish
He is.
you the best. I'm praying for you.
Ma'am, if you're a Christian, you need to repent from your support of the murder of children.
Jesus fucking Christ, bro.
Okay, sorry for that language at the end, but that's them talking about that. You know, you need to repent of your sins and it. Okay, he just got done completely ignoring everything she had to say. Again, what she had to say wasn't particularly useful, but if you're persuading people, it's not about what's useful. It's about what's important to them. And he ends his conversation. He ends this entire blunder of a conversation with, you know, you can be forgiven for your sins through Jesus Christ and all this. Dude, you're basically just making the name of Jesus Christ associated with people who don't listen, people who don't care about women, right? Again, that's not necessarily true that he doesn't care about women, but that's what she thinks. She thought that at the beginning of the video. She thinks that at the end. Okay, she went in thinking that. He did not get her to exit the conversation thinking otherwise. Okay, you're associating the name of Jesus Christ with people who don't like women, people who don't listen, people who think women are evil for getting abortions, people who are hated by her own admission. She says people hate you, people don't like you, people think you're stupid, you need to get out of here. We want you to go away. You're making everyone else's life miserable. We think you're a waste of skin. Okay, now what's your plan of action when someone says that to you? Oh, by the way, I'm here in the name of Jesus Christ. Really? Really, dude? Is that like that's someone just got done saying that they think you're like the scum of the earth. And then you say, hey, by the way, I'm representing fill in the blank. Like imagine you're like a door-to-door salesman, right? And you go knock on someone's door, right? And they say, oh my gosh, not you again. Please, dude, go away. I don't like you. Okay, I know you're my neighbor, but like, I don't like you. I hate you. I think you're a waste of skin. Can't stand you. And then you say, oh, by the way, I'm here in the name of Jesus Christ, or I'm here in the name of Dunder Mifflin, or whatever. Do you think your company or whomever you're there for is going to be happy with the fact that you just associated their name with your bad reputation? Probably not. Probably not, right? And this is the difference between being right and persuading people, right? Being right and being persuasive. Two different things. Let's get into the next video.
Hayden.
Nice to meet you,
Good
Hayden.
to meet you. Yeah, so I'll start up.
Her name's Mac, she said. Yeah, so he starts off good here. Let's see what happens.
I state my position on abortion, then you're welcome to state yours. So I'm what's called an abolitionist of abortion. It's a little different than pro-lifer. So I believe abortion is murder. I think we need to criminalize abortion as murder. The bills I support are called bills of equal protection. All they seek to do is establish equal protection for our preborn neighbors, just like our born neighbors have. If someone murders a child in the womb intentionally through abortion, they get charged with murder. There is one section in the bills that I support that says if averting the death of the mother results in the accidental or unintentional death of the child, then that would be okay as long as all reasonable alternatives have been, pursued.
Okay.
So that being said, if you want to go ahead and state your position, happy to hear you out.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you hold?
It just states it, yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome.
That was good. He began by summarizing his view. That was a good summary. He's building rapport, things like that. But yeah, we can keep going.
So my position is I am a pro-choicer, or I believe in pro-choice. I personally believe that women have the right to choose whether or not they carry a baby to term, especially in terms of rape or in the danger of a mother. In particular, it is my belief that the choice to carry a child to term can be dangerous physically, mentally, and psychologically to a mother no matter what happens. And so it's super important to make sure that a mother completely understands what's going to happen to them before they are forced to carry a child to term.
So just a clarifying question, are you okay with abortion up to 9 months then, or?
I am not okay with abortion up to 9 months. I personally believe abortion should be legal up into the 3rd trimester though.
Okay.
Good asking clarifying questions. This is a good beginning here. He's asking clarifying questions, trying to figure out what she thinks. She already kind of broke it down for him. That was pretty good. But yeah, at the beginning of the conversation, you want to start by asking good questions. Ask him, just start gathering information. You're not even arguing at this point. At the beginning of a conversation with someone you disagree with, just gather information. Why do you think this way? Or why do you think that? Start asking questions. And eventually you'll be able to get to the challenging questions, right? What he does a lot of, and you're going to see it throughout this video especially, is he talks like a cross-examiner, like a lawyer, right? If you've ever seen a lawyer TV show or something like that, they get out there, isn't it true that you did this? And isn't it true that you did that? Right? He's going to come off as very aggressive, very blunt, very stern. He's going to be insistent, and that's not very good. Okay? You want to build rapport. You want to talk to this person like they're your equal, right? Hey, Mac, it's nice to meet you. Tell me about your view. Here's my view. Let me hear your view. So he starts off good here.
Why the 3rd trimester?
So my mother is actually an OBGYN, and in the truth of the medical fact is that you cannot call a child viable outside of the womb up until the 3rd trimester. And so for me, viability outside of the womb is where you draw the line at when an abortion can happen.
I do think that some children have made it at like 22 weeks or about that range, but either way, it sounds like viability roughly would be the argument, correct?
Yes,
That's good. That's good. He's establishing that. Now would be a great time to ask why viability is important to her. Right? Why is that important? What do you mean by that? Like, okay, so viability. Why should anybody take this kind of viability view? Like, what is this? Explain this to me. Explain your thinking to me, step by step.
About where my line stands.
So you're saying, as previously to viability, right? The child requires support from the mother. And you're saying if they require that support, we can't keep them alive outside the mother's body, you should be able to kill them, correct?
I don't believe we should be able to kill them, but terminating an abortion, I don't see as killing. I see as protecting a mother.
So what happens to the child?
So it's not a child until it is born.
Protecting the mother. She'll come back to that.
And
It is a child. So the definition of a child would be like a son or a daughter, which is from fertilization. Also, if you Google when does human life begin scientifically, it'll say fertilization. So it's a child.
So it's not a child because medically
What is it?
Okay, did you see how he kind of bulldozed through that? Now, again, I understand why he's being insistent, because he's 100% factually correct in everything he just said. But that, again, just being right doesn't mean being persuasive. That's not the same thing. Also, be very careful about saying, well, the first thing when you Google it, it'll say this, because depending on the search engine you're using, depending on, what the way you Google it, whatever, it might come up differently. I've had it come up differently for me, just looking it up myself. Don't bank on that. Don't do that. Okay. But again, you might be able to establish it through asking some other questions, right? Is it growing? Well, doesn't that mean it's alive, right? You might say something like that, right? If it's growing, then wouldn't that make it alive?
Not this is not like settling on any biblical standpoints or anything. The time that a child begins at birth, the life starts at birth. Life starts at the first breath. And I've heard that you're coming back to biblical a lot. I mean, that's biblical.
So that was really good. By the way, you're going to be as you watch this, you're going to notice Mac. This is the video that's really, really good to sort of zoom in on and figure out what persuasive tactics work in conversations and how to build rapport. You know, we have a blue-haired, you know, he, him, they, them, gender fluid, you know, person here. Oh my goodness, you know, oh, this is, you know, he's going to clown on her totally. No, she actually does 10 times better than him in this conversation. She's way more pleasant, way better to listen to, way more nice, polite, kind, even just good at keeping the conversation coming back to a good point. She does say some things that are not exactly true. She's obviously misinformed about a few things, but she is very, very good at building rapport and having a good conversation. He is really bad.
No, actually, life doesn't begin at first breath biblically. It's not true. If you look up like...
Oh yeah, that was the other thing. So she tries to appeal to the Bible. That was extremely smart of her. Now she's wrong, right? This is a common internet myth that, you know, well, in Genesis it says God breathed the breath of life into Adam. So therefore, the standard for when life begins is biblically is you know, when you have your first breath, right? Which is ridiculous and stupid and completely not true, and no one has ever thought that ever. That's some internet myth. But even though she was uninformed about what she just said, even though she said something that was completely inaccurate about his religion, that's okay, because she's building a rapport and she's trying to speak to what she thinks is important to him. That's really, really good. Okay, you'll notice how he doesn't do that. She's trying to say, okay, yeah, this guy, he seems like he's a Christian. Let me speak to something that he thinks, and let me kind of try to explain it from my view, how I would see it. But yeah, you know, even from your view, right? Doesn't life begin at first breath? Very good.
When does human life begin scientifically? It'll say fertilization. So both biologically and from the Christian Bible, it says human life begins at fertilization.
Life does not begin at fertilization. Like, that's
well,
just
even
not
when we were talking,
correct.
you said like 24 weeks.
And again, here's one thing I'll tell you that she doesn't do. Well, she does this well, obviously, but this is not good. Do not ever be thrown off by someone's confidence in their position, right? She says, well, you know, my mom is like an OBGYN or whatever, you know, and I, you know, that's just not medically accurate that life begins at fertilization. No, it does. Like it factually does. So just because she says it confidently, she kind of does it with a little snicker, you know, this is you're just very confused here, sir. Just because someone says something confidently doesn't mean they're accurate in what they're saying. So don't get bogged down by that. Some people get bogged down by that. They think, oh my goodness, you know, this person sounds really confident. I've had that happen in conversations myself where I was talking to a pro-choicer and I said, you know, oh, what do you think about abortion? She said, you know, well, I'm a science major, and in retrospect, I should have asked her which branch of science, right? She's probably, well, biology, you know, or you know, it would have been the good thing to say. Who knows? She's probably studying geology or something. Who knows? But you know, she says that, and she says, yeah, well, you know, it's scientific that life begins at viability, right? Completely not true. Completely not true. But she said it so confidently that I actually sort of didn't know what to say. This was many, many years ago. I'm much better at persuading people now and having conversations and stuff. But this was like one of my first conversations I ever had on abortion with someone who disagreed with me. So just kind of something to think about.
It's 30 weeks from when? Fertilization. And also, again, it is correct. If you want to Google it right now, you're welcome to. If you Google when does human life begin scientifically, first word, fertilization. So it is correct.
Okay. All right. So we're not going to be...
Okay. You can see how she's like, okay, dude, we get it. You're smart. You're very insistent. Again, just insisting on things to people is not helpful, even though he's completely correct. And of all the things to be insistent about, this is an important one to be, but there are better ways of approaching that. Ask her questions, right? How do you know that life begins at Bible? What do you even mean by life at Bible? What do you mean by life? What does that mean to you? Explain what you mean. Because a lot of the time, people on both sides of this issue mean completely different things. One side thinks when we say life, we mean like a person, right? Like your person, or your consciousness, that there's someone, like before that, it's just a clump of cells. It's just sort of this husk. There's no soul. There's no like animating feature. There's not a real person there, right? And the pro-lifer usually means it's living like biologically, right? Soul or no soul, whatever. It's like a human biological life.
Able to find middle ground on that one.
Well,
what's kind of your next point?
Well, so you said it's not a child. Definition of child would be a son or daughter, which it is from fertilization forward. So why is it okay to kill the child before viability?
So for me, the moment of birth is when a child is born. First breath is when a child is viable. It's when a child is able to.
So it's not third trimester anymore. Now it's born unborn. I'm just trying to keep
So for me, third trimester is when children are viable outside of the womb, when they can breathe and survive outside of the womb on their own. That is the moment of viability. Is the moment of birth. Is the moment of life. For me, that's where I settle on that.
Okay, so like if a child, let's say at like 30 weeks is born prematurely, let's say they need a ventilator, right? They need external resources to keep them alive. Mm-hmm. You say it's wrong to kill them because they're outside the woman's body, right?
Yes.
Okay, so a child in the womb, right, it also needs external resources to survive. It's getting those resources from the mother. You say it's okay for this child to die because they need external resources, but you say in the case of like a 30-week-old who's born prematurely, it's not okay for this child to be killed because it needs external resources. Both cases, they need external resources.
External resources is different when you are relying on our current medical advances as humans versus relying on another human being.
Okay, this would be a perfect time to ask why. Right, and her answer is probably something to do with, well, I'm a person. I've got a lot of interests. I've got a lot of things to do, right? I've got a lot of stuff to do with my life, and a machine doesn't have anything to do, right? A machine, an incubator, whatever you want to use to keep the baby alive, that can kind of run its job, and I want to go out there and do my thing, which is kind of the feminist idea. Again, this is probably not what's going through her mind, but for a lot of people, the idea is like we need to liberate ourselves from biology, right? Women need, in order to be liberated, they need to no longer be able to have children. They need to be able to control that. That's why they're for abortion, right? Because they think they need to be able to control their reproductive capacities to the level that men can. Otherwise, they'll never be equal to men. At least that's their idea.
Expecting a woman to support a child is unfair, and not, especially expecting a woman to care for a child who they did not necessarily want, they did not ask for. That is an unfair statement to cause. But if a child is relying on our current, the magic that our brains as humans have been able to create, then that is a completely different realm of conversation.
Okay, so
and he's about to just completely bulldoze over that point. He's still going to respond to it, but it's not going to be in as helpful of a way. She just outlined exactly what I just said, right? I just predicted that, right? She said, yeah, that's because I understand her views well, right? I'm well acquainted with someone of her side on this issue. Everything about what she just said was, it's unfair, right? Left wingers see biology itself as unfair. They think that they should be able to sort of chart their own course in life, independent of biology, even independent of really the kind of just anything in the world. There shouldn't be any limits on anything. And in a certain respect, they're almost kind of extreme libertarians in a certain sense. But yeah, you can see that in what she just said. How is it fair that a woman has to carry a pregnancy? It's not a matter of fairness. It's a matter of reality. But again, asking some good questions to kind of get at what her underlying beliefs are. Why do you make that assumption?
Woman, let's say, this is a hypothetical, right? If a woman is trapped in a cabin in a snowstorm, okay, and she has a baby, right? Let's say she gives birth, right? And the only food in the cabin is food babies can't eat, because, you know, some food they'll choke and die and things like that. But she can breastfeed the child for a week. Should she have to breastfeed for that week since that child is born?
I think that comes down to the mother's choice.
Oh, so if the mother doesn't breastfeed and the kid starves to death, do you think she should be charged with murder or no?
I think it really depends on the situation, because you said that they're completely trapped. No.
Yeah, there's no, like, it's a snowstorm, right? So they can't leave, they can't go get other resources. She's got to either breastfeed the child for a week or the child dies.
I think that
This is a somewhat popular analogy from pro-lifers and abolitionists. It's called the cabin in a blizzard analogy. Essentially, the idea is to get at it's a thought experiment meant to demonstrate that even outside of the womb, we seem to have an expectation on women to use their bodies, right, when there is no other option, to sustain the life of children, young babies, right? This is an inseparable part of women's biology. And so he's trying to kind of get at that. That's the design of the argument, or the thought experiment, rather. And it's good that he uses this because it's framed in the form of a question.
that hypothetical is something that would never happen.
Well, I'm just
looking at.
Again, she tries to escape through, the thought experiment, but that's not how thought experiments work, right? The whole point is you're not supposed to get out of it. You're supposed to think about it deeper, right? It's kind of like pro-choicers when they use the burning fertility clinic thought experiment, right? Well, that would never happen, right? Is not really a response to that.
Yeah,
the
but
reason,
looking-
can I explain why it's important
Please.
here? Because if you say, no, she doesn't have to feed the child, then you're saying it's okay for her to intentionally murder the child, basically. But if you say she must feed the child, then it's showing that you recognize there's a special relationship with parents and their children where they're morally obligated to use their body, she's using her breast or boob, to support another human being.
There's absolutely a
Okay. Again, he comes across very abrasive. Did you hear what he just said? Her boob. Dude, it's a very crass, disrespectful way of talking about women's bodies. Now, again, that's I'm not saying that's a bad word, but in the context of this conversation, don't use that word. Dude, use the anatomically correct word. Just say the right word, okay? It's not that difficult, right? Her boob. Dude, that's not helping the conversation, right? You're supposed to be coming across as respectful toward women, right? That should be your goal here. Instead, you're coming across very dismissive, very blunt, very forceful. And that's not going to speak to someone who's very, I would say, seemingly open-minded like she is.
moral obligation once you bring a child to term.
Okay, so
to care for a
just
child.
real quick, so she would have to breastfeed then, correct?
I don't think she would have to breastfeed because there are ways to
So if she
care
doesn't,
for a child beyond breastfeeding.
but if she doesn't in this case, that child's going to die. Would you say
That's
she
true.
should be charged with murder in that case?
I don't know. I don't think
He's good
murder
at
is
oppressing
necessarily the
her,
correct option.
But she's intentionally not feeding the child to kill it.
Correct.
So that is premeditated, unjust killing of an innocent
Is
human
she-
being. That's murder.
But part of that also comes down to, is she meaning to kill the child, or is she caring for herself? And
Let's say
trying
well, there's enough food for her and the baby to survive. The only
Okay.
question is she going to use her body to support another human being? Should she have to?
I think that she should not have to, because there are other ways to care for that child outside of breastfeeding.
No, in this case,
Again, he kind of misstated the analogy and she's getting confused. There's enough food for her, and she is in such a position that she has just recently given birth to another baby at her home, that she's snowed in this cabin with a different person's baby, right? And she has enough food, but there's no formula for the baby. But she can lactate, right? Does she have a right to refuse? Most people would say no. Most people would say, well, no, she's obligated to that. Now, obviously, there's more responses to that, like, well, it's less imposition on her to breastfeed than it is to be pregnant. That's a good point. But again, he's confusing her because he's not getting the analogy right. He's talking faster than he can think.
In the snowstorm where she's in the cabin, the only way is if she breastfeeds. Should she have to breastfeed?
Then she will breastfeed because she's a mother.
And if she doesn't, and she says, this child has no right to use my body, and she intentionally kills the child by not allowing it to breastfeed and it starves to death, should she be charged with murder?
I don't think it's murder. I think it would be manslaughter.
But it's intentional. But it's intentional. Because she's premeditated.
okay.
She's doing it premeditated.
Don't worry.
It's intentional. She's saying, this child has no right to use my body, so I'm not going to breastfeed, and my child can die.
Okay.
So how's that not murder? It's premeditated, unjust killing of an innocent human being.
And I stand by, it is not murder, it would be manslaughter or
But
some
the
other...
difference between murder and manslaughter is intent, right? In the
Exactly.
case of murder, this is premeditated, right?
It is not premeditated.
It is.
though.
She's
How-
saying
did
this
okay,
child
no,
has.
Let's back up. Let's back
Okay.
up. Did she plan to get trapped in this cabin?
Doesn't matter. She's
did
there.
she plan this? Did she plan this?
Again, doesn't matter. She's in the cabin.
He's right that none of this really matters, but in another sense, he's kind of focusing on the wrong thing. I'm not going to like get down on him too bad here, but I would just say at that point, who cares whether we call it murder or manslaughter? Both of those things are very wrong, right? And there's no way she can disagree with that, right? Both of those things are highly illegal. Don't do either of those things, right? Are we on the same page, right? So that would be wrong, wouldn't it? And therefore, it seems like we have this ability as a community to come together and say, you know what? We'll even call it what it is. Force someone to use their body to keep another person alive. There are times when that's okay. That's his point, right? But he's kind of hard. It's difficult at sticking to that issue. I don't know. It could just be, hindsight is 20/20. But
She's saying this child who is living right now and could survive if she breastfeeds. She's saying this child has no right to use my body. I'm going to allow this child to die because it has no right to suck on my boob. Is that murder?
It is not.
okay, again, suck on my gosh. Okay.
Not murder. It is manslaughter.
But
She
again,
did not
it's intentional.
She did not plan to get trapped in a cabin. She did not plan to get into.
She
this
did plan.
situation.
It's 7 days. She's saying on day 1, this child has no right to use my body. I'm going to let it die. That's intentionally killing the child.
But also, you said there's food in this cabin, right?
There's what?
You said there's food in this cabin, right? That she
For
can
her,
eat?
that she can
Yeah.
eat, but it's too big for the baby, so she has
Okay,
to
there are
eat.
ways to make food viable for children. That is not just breastfeeding.
Again, she's
Let's say
trying
she
to
doesn't have the tools to
escape
do that. Let's say the only way.
the
the
thought
tools
experiment.
is the tool is a rock and a bowl. Like, you're fine.
I don't know if a newborn at let's say 3 days old, I don't know if they can eat, let's say it's meat. I don't
Okay.
know.
All right. Okay. I'll give you if it's meat, then yes, that's not. But if it's bread, if it is any form of vegetable,
Okay, so let's say it's meat. Let's say it's food once again that the child can't eat. Should
Okay.
she have to breastfeed?
He's good at pinning her. He's good at bringing this back to the point there. I'll give him props for that.
don't think that she should have to breastfeed.
So you're okay with saying this child can die because that.
She just said, I don't think she should be forced to breastfeed. My goodness. And you're going to see as we go through, while she is very good at having a good conversation, she takes an extremely radical view on this, an extreme version of bodily autonomy argument here. It's totally nuts level. What? Wait, you just said she shouldn't get in trouble for not breastfeeding the child? My gosh. Anyway.
That child has no right to use the mother's body?
Yes.
Okay. So what about, let's say, a mother who's a logging worker? And logging workers, there's a very high fatality rate for those who are employed in that industry. Let's say it's a single mother. She's got a child. She says, you know what? Even though this job, it allows me to provide for my child, this child has no right to force me to use my body in a high-risk job to provide for them. So she says, I'm going to kill this child and take a job that pays less that's safer. Is that okay?
So let's pull backwards because right now we're talking about children who are
I'm not quite sure where he was going with that. But anyway.
viable, who are outside of the womb, who are not relying on a mother's, who are not relying on
Oh,
a
but they
mother's, who are relying on a mother in a very external sense. There's something completely different about when a child is within your body. I'm assuming you are a cis male?
Yep.
Okay. So in that conversation, you can't speak to the trauma that happens when you carry a pregnancy to term. You can't speak to the trauma that happens even before carrying a pregnancy to term that is settled in the core of what carrying a baby is. Not only does it completely destroy your internal organs. Have you seen pictures of what happens to a mother's organs when they're...
Okay, so do you see? She is guiding the conversation back to where it needs to be. Much better. Look at how masterful she is at this, right? He should have already gotten to this. We're like almost 10 minutes into this video. This should have been done in like minute maybe 3 or 4, right? He should have already asked enough questions to get to this point. Why do you think there's a difference between, a machine taking care of a baby versus you taking care of a baby? Like, why do you have the right to do that, right?
they're carrying a pregnancy to
Well,
term?
I'll point out that many women have given birth. We're still around here today.
Absolutely,
So-
but it's still traumatizing at its core. The trauma that motherhood is, the trauma that carrying a child to term is, cannot be ignored in these conversations because you cannot
So kill the
fully,
child.
you cannot
Okay. Did you just see what he did there? Just bulldoze through her, right? So kill the child right in the middle of her sentence, right? It's just, dude, you're not making her feel heard. She needs to feel heard. Okay, she's talking about, again, you got to get clued into this stuff. She's talking about trauma. Okay, this is probably someone who goes to counseling quite a bit, right? We can probably assume that. Probably goes to, a psychologist or whatever, the trauma, everything, that's how liberals are. Everything's traumatic, going through puberty is even traumatic. Oh, the trauma. Okay. She is clearly very well versed, though, in what counselors and people like that talk about, right? And how they act and how they behave, asking good questions, trying to relate to someone and trying to empathize with them, trying to reach across the aisle, see things from their point of view. He is very bad at that. And he's just bulldozing her. This is not a way to persuade people. You need to make people feel heard. And I know this sounds bad because I used to be him. I used to be Hayden. I used to be the guy who would go out and I knew everything there was to talk about this issue. I really did. And I still do, right? I could talk just like him. I could be just as brazen, just as bold. But there's a difference, again, between being right and being persuasive. Okay? You don't persuade people by interrupting, by trying to make them sound like the bad guy, so kill the child. She's talking about something that's clearly very important to her. Look at it. This is traumatic. This is traumatic. Now, she may be right. She may be wrong. But to her, this is important. And you're not going to be able to get to your perspective until you've built rapport and shown her that you are hearing her perspective. Some techniques you can use to do that are active listening and what we might call mirroring, right? Where you mirror body language, obviously, but there's also the idea of repeating the last few words someone said. So she might say, giving birth is very traumatic. You might say, traumatic? In kind of an upward inflection, traumatic, right? And have her explain herself. Do that for like 5 minutes. Just keep doing that. Just keep repeating the last few words she said for like 5 minutes. Don't even say anything about your view. Do that for 5 minutes straight. She'll listen to anything you have to say after that. She'll be very patient. She's going to walk away from that conversation being like, wow, I don't know, that guy just seemed so reasonable. Like, I didn't agree with him on a lot, but wow, he was a really man. My goodness, people want to talk about themselves. People want to talk about what's valuable to them. People want to feel heard. If you're not making them feel heard, you're not making ground.
fully consent to you cannot fully consent to carrying a child to term without being fully informed of what carrying a child to term is going to be. Now, you and I disagree at a core belief of what a child is.
Well, hang on. I just want to point something out. Do you believe in like neglect laws that parents are required?
Okay, did you hear what he just... You can tell very quickly. He was not listening. He was waiting for his turn to speak. Well, hold on. Let me just say something. And he starts going off on some completely different thing, which is technically connected to what he was originally trying to make the point about, which is fair, but he should have let her kind of guide the conversation there, because she was just getting at the most fundamental thing they need to establish for this conversation to gain ground anywhere, for either side to make a difference in this, which is, what is it, right? There's a good documentary on YouTube about this called What Is It? Testing. Okay, sorry, I lost my mic there. Anyway, there's a good documentary on YouTube about this. It's called What Is It? It's about abortion. They go around asking people, what is it? What is it inside the womb, right? That's important. That's the important part to get at. So he should be following along there, along her trail of thought there, on what the difference between a child and a non-child is. What makes something a child? What makes something a life, right? She was just getting to that. And then he interrupted her and he starts talking about neglect laws, which is a really good point, by the way. He'll make a good point here. But yeah, that was a missed opportunity. By the way, I'll just pause real quick. If you are liking this content, if you're learning something here, if you're like, okay, yeah, I'm tracking with what you're saying, I'm hearing what you're putting down, drop a like and subscribe, or at least check out some of my other stuff. I have really good stuff, and I got a lot of stuff coming in the future. Subscribe for more. Check out the rest of my content. You're gonna like it. I'm gonna teach a lot about persuasion in the future. All right, let's keep going.
Like use their bodies to keep their child alive?
I do.
Okay, so
But that is, but we're coming.
No. It's so you're saying with neglect laws, parents should use their bodies to allow their child to continue to develop in a safe and healthy environment. In the case of pregnancy, mother's using her body to allow that child to continue to develop in a safe and healthy environment. You're just saying the mother should be able to murder her child.
It is a completely different conversation, because
not.
what you are speaking of is a child who is both a part of this world and who there are other ways to care for that child. There's well, not as much in the United States, but there are social laws that help protect a child. There are options.
Okay, so here's a good place for a question. Like, for example, she says, there are other things we can do to take care of these children. Well, okay, think about it this way, right? You might ask a thought-provoking question like, well, let me ask you a question. Do you think that the less people there are to take care of someone, the less responsibility there is, or the more responsibility there is for that person to take care of someone? Like, for example, if you came across you were just walking around and you saw, I don't know, you were in the middle of a blizzard trying to get home, and you saw a baby, right, in a basket out in the snow. You're the only one there. Everybody else has gone to sleep. It's nighttime. You can't get there. And the baby's going to die. What do you do? Would you take care of that baby? And of course, she's going to say yes. But you're the only one there. Right? Now, again, she might try to shift the conversation. Well, no, but that's not all that, big of a burden, all that. Okay, that's fine. But just thinking about the concept itself, right? The less people there are to take care of someone, the less people there are, the more responsibility you have, not the less, right? If there's a lot of bystanders, there's a lot of people around, everybody can pitch in. But if you're the only one there, that makes it even more your responsibility, doesn't it? Ask a question like that.
Like adoption and food stamps and different ways that children can be cared for once they are outside of the womb. When you are inside of the womb, it is the mother's responsibility wholly and fully. And especially in the United States, where we do not medically.
Why not before, you might ask? Or, why don't we come up with a plan that doesn't end life rather than one that does, right? It seems like we're very uncreative here. You'll notice this about liberals, they're the most creative people in the world. They'll come up with all sorts of excuses, all sorts of reasons to do all sorts of things. They will go to the ends of the earth to justify all sorts of things. But when it comes to abortion, they get extremely uncreative. Extremely uncreative. It's very odd. Very odd phenomenon.
Take care of our mothers the way we need to. It's not
Suddenly it's all, well, it's not practical, right? Where it's not practical. That's how a conservative argues. Conservatives are always arguing it's not practical to do socialism. It's not practical to do, to have a welfare state that's like this, and it's not practical to let all these immigrants in and blah blah blah. And suddenly when it comes to abortion, they switch. What about the children? Think about the children. That's what the conservative says, and the liberal says, well, this isn't practical. There's going to be people getting abortions anyway. There's going to be people that, oh my goodness.
not even a conversation about whether or not it is not even a conversation that can be had about whether the difference between a birthed baby and an unbirthed fetus are the same.
Just real quick, what do you think takes more effort to support? Like a child at like 12 weeks development inside a mother's body, or like a newborn? Because I can guarantee you, every mother is going to say the newborn.
Completely different.
That is a very good point. However, he could have done that in a much better tone of voice.
Different conversation.
No, it's the same.
No.
I agree with his attempt there to press that, because that's really important. That's completely different. No, that's the fulcrum of this conversation right now.
And it's the same, because a mother with a newborn, right? She has to use her body to take care of that newborn. If she doesn't, right? She just says, "I don't want this kid anymore," and just leaves it in a closet, and the kid dies. She's charged with murder.
Absolutely.
In the case of a child in the womb, that's a mother using her body to allow her child to continue to develop in a safe and healthy environment. Absolutely. If she fails to do that by intentionally killing the child through abortion, that is murder. Just like a mother who keeps a kid in the closet.
No, because that's a completely different.
What's different?
We're misunderstanding on the base concept.
The only difference is age. The only difference is age.
The difference is not okay. New question: when is a child's first birthday?
First birthday?
Okay, this is a really dumb argument she's about to make.
Well, I'll point out in terms of like birthdays,
No,
right?
what is a child's first birthday? It's a simple question.
First birthday? Well, when they're born.
Okay, it's when they're born.
Yeah, but I'd point out that people always say this argument of like, oh, well, why do we track birthdays and not like dates of conception? It's pretty hard to backtrack to like a date of conception. So I'd say that's typical.
I know the exact day I was conceived.
Not everyone does.
Most people can. Hey Alex, what day were you born?
July 26th. What day were you conceived? What day did your parents have? He doesn't know. See, exactly.
You were born July 26th.
Okay, he's being really he's being really obnoxious here. See, exactly. Oh, look at I got the point. Oh my goodness.
When I'm saying.
Okay, so I just skipped over that part of the video. I clipped that out because it's just not helpful, right? She's trying to calculate the date of conception. This is a dumb argument. You hear this on like Reddit. I mean, again, she's very good at persuading and things like that, but she's not. Yeah, this is just a bad argument. Pro-choicers, do not use this argument. Don't do this. Right? Well, life begins when we start counting a birthday. What? That's dumb. We do have this person in the chat, Unhelpful. Who knows what that is? I don't know. Adolf Hitler. I don't know what his name is. Anyway, anti-abortion activists who paid off SCOTUS, that's Supreme Court of the United States, are the best gift the Democrats could have asked for. Well, they didn't pay off anyone, so I don't know what you're going on about, buddy, but all right. He's going on something in his own head. Again, like I said, a lot of pro-choicers, not the brightest bunch, but even so, you can have good conversations with some of them, like Mac here, right? She's very good at having a conversation. She doesn't make stupid points like, anti-abortion activists are paying off SCOTUS, right? She's, this is like basically like the level of QAnon conspiracy theories at this point, but again, which I thought the left didn't like, but okay. All right. Anyway,
if our United States government tracks, it doesn't decide when a child is born. It doesn't decide that a child is a child until the day a child is born.
But real quick, that's not true. For example, if a boyfriend gives his girlfriend like RU-486, which is the abortion pill, and tells her it's antibiotics and it kills her child, the boyfriend gets charged with murder. If the mother does the same thing right now, she doesn't get charged with murder. So all you're arguing for is special murder rights for mothers. But the government does in fact acknowledge that the child in the womb is a human being, and they do protect that human being with laws. Right now, they just provide a special exception for mothers.
That's a fair point.
That's okay. So let's backtrack. Your first example: a boyfriend giving a girlfriend the abortion pill and lying to her about what it is. That is a completely different conversation, because what's happening there is the person who is carrying this child is not consenting to the termination of that pregnancy. What is happening is a boyfriend, a male, a masculine presenting person, is deciding that they decide what happens to this child before the mother gets to decide. What I advocate for, and completely what my stance is a woman has the right to choose. She gets to choose whether she carries a baby to term. She gets to choose whether she becomes a mother.
So just real quick, so should the boyfriend be charged?
So she's trying to get at this right to choose idea. So her problem with it is that it's not consensual.
Charged with murder in that case? Then?
Absolutely, because the boyfriend lied to the mother.
Awesome. So
Okay, so that's going to be a problem there. He's about to go with that and run with it. She misheard. I'm just going to go for it here. It's some people might say, well, no. He said it very clearly and she heard it. I'm going to say she completely misheard what he said. And then she said yes, and then probably thought about it for a second. Oops, I didn't mean to say it was murder. To her, this is not murder. It's the thing that he should be charged with is like drugging her unconsensually. That's what she meant was it's wrong. She didn't mean it's murder, but she just said yes, and he's about to go with that and run with it because he's again not paying attention to the conversation. He's not paying attention to what she's saying. And that's a difficult problem for him because, you know, hold on one second. We got a weirdo in the chat here. He says, nah, this dude doesn't really seem worth talking to. Couldn't even engage with my point. You're talking to me. I asked you, do you have a question to ask? I couldn't engage with your point. Well, dude, you're not really on point. This is a video about how to have a conversation on abortion. Which again, I understand you talked about abortion, but you're talking about like elections and stuff. We're not talking about that. We're talking about like persuasion theory, things like that. If you want to ask a question about like, oh, like how do you persuade someone? Or if you want to ask, I don't know, just like an ethics question about abortion or I don't know, whatever, like that's fine. Like go ahead and ask, but I'm not here to talk about Democrats and the Supreme Court of the United States and, you know, Alabama elections. That's not really important. You know, so, I mean, you're welcome here. Keep, you know, ask whatever questions you want, but I'm not here to like get derailed by some election point. I'm not here to talk about elections. All right. Anyway.
I think we've established something here. We've established that the child is a human being, that if the boyfriend does it, it's murder. So again, you're just arguing for special murder rights for mothers. So we've now established it as a human being who's worthy of respect and worthy of dignity under law and protection under law.
What I have established is that a mother has a right to choose. And what I will continue to come back to, I'm going to say this into your camera, what I will continue to come back to is that women have the right to choose. When you're editing this, I don't care what
to choose murder. To choose murder. Because you said it was murder when the boyfriend did it. So now when the mother does it, it's also murder.
Women have the right to choose.
Okay, did you hear that? He's bulldozing over it. Again, he wasn't listening earlier, right? He was talking about, again, this guy. What is he doing? That's okay. Not really interested in your answers. I can tell. Anyway.
Choose whether they carry a child to term. Women have the right to choose.
Where does that right come from?
Women have the right to choose that.
Where does that right come from?
Women have the right to choose whether they carry a baby to term. They have the right to choose whether they birth that child, and when they birth that child, they have the right to choose what happens to that child.
Do they have the right to choose to kill their born children too?
They do not have the right to kill a child.
Why?
They have the right to terminate a pregnancy.
Which is killing a child. It's killing the child in the womb. You're
And
using a euphemism.
What we're coming back to continually is this disconnect between what a child is.
But you just acknowledged when the boyfriend did it, it's murder. You're just arguing for special murder rights for mothers.
And I don't necessarily think that the boyfriend should be charged with murder.
But that's what you just said,
And
literally
that is
2
what I
minutes
just
ago.
said. Because that's what you kind of backed me into a corner with, was should he be charged with murder?
Yeah, and you said yes.
Now, when a boyfriend lies, if a boyfriend lies to a woman,
Again, she could be a little bit better here at helping to sort of illustrate her own point. She should probably say something like, just sort of amend it. Just say, okay, let me amend what I meant before. I didn't mean that it's murder. I kind of said that because you were pushing me on it. What I meant was, I think it's wrong to drug someone without their consent. I think that's wrong. And that was what I was saying was wrong. I didn't mean it was murder. Sorry, I said that off a second ago. Sorry about that. And just move on. But anyway.
which if it does happen, okay, that's fucked up at its core.
Oh, why is it messed up?
Because a boyfriend, a male presenting
Sorry about the language. I didn't have a chance to edit out all of it. Sorry.
person, the person
What
who...
if it was, say, what if it was like a lesbian couple and one of them cheated and had sex with a guy and then the lesbian person got
absolutely.
mad? So what if it was a woman who tricked her lesbian girlfriend into doing
if it is a woman, it doesn't matter the gender of the person. What matters is it's...
Yeah, that was kind of a poor point. She shouldn't have brought that up. They like the identity politics stuff. But anyway.
someone else just coming in and deciding that it's what the problem settles at. Someone else deciding what you need to do with your body.
So it's wrong to do things with someone else's body.
Yes. That at its
So
core.
the child in the womb, that's a body.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion is killing the body inside your body.
A body who is not only leeching off of you, but also causing irreparable harm. So let's say, okay.
If it's irreparable harm, then why is the maternal mortality rate 30 out of 100,000? It's extremely low.
It is, because we've had wonderful medical advancements in the last couple of years. However, it still is, the fact of the matter is that the trauma of birth, the trauma of carrying a child to term, stays with mothers from the day that that child is conceived.
Again, you'll notice the difference in thinking here, in how the conservative Christian looks at this versus the atheist Democrat, right? Or, this is in the United States, so they call them Democrats, but leftists, right? This is the difference, right? The pro-lifer, although he's not doing a very good job at representing it, believes in the sort of sanctity of life. They believe in the beauty and wonder and awesomeness of, the childbirth and child rearing and all of this, and see this as a gift, as a beautiful, wonderful thing. The atheist left-winger sees this as traumatic. Biology itself is traumatic. We need to liberate ourselves. This is why they believe in transgenderism and stuff like that. We need to liberate ourselves from biology. It's up to us. We need our choice. We need to make our own choice. If you don't feel comfortable with it, then just don't do it, right? Whereas his belief is from Christianity, which says that all life is sacred, and of course that human beings were created in the words of God himself, very good, right? He said it was very good. That's what he called human beings when he made them. So again, just a fundamental difference that he could do a little better job at maybe kind of extracting. What do you mean by that? Why do you think that? Why do you describe women's bodies as being, it's so traumatic? Don't you think that's a beautiful thing? That's intrinsically beautiful, not just a matter of choice, not just a matter of, it's beautiful if I choose to have it. Isn't that intrinsically a good thing that women have been, maybe we might even say blessed, that they have the honor of doing that? That's a relationship. That's a thing that no man will ever be able to say he can do. Obviously, she probably doesn't even, agree with that, but she'll say a male presenting person, whatever. But the point is, right? That's incredible. That's his perspective. He needs to kind of bridge that gap maybe a little bit there. I don't know. Might be a little tricky to do. I'll be honest, I don't know how I would do that, but just ask those questions, you know.
And so they should be able to murder their children is your position,
No.
correct?
My
Yes.
position is that a woman has the right to choose what happens to her child.
So a woman has the right, does that apply after birth? You said a woman has the right to choose what to do with her child. Does that include after birth? Because if that's the position, she'd be able to murder her born child.
And I continue to stand by, a mother has the right to decide what to do with her body. Now,
She said, choose what to do with her child earlier. That was good what he did, but I would just make it very succinct. I would say, choose to do what with her child? And just kind of let that sit. Well, to choose to terminate. Well, what do you mean by terminate? What's being terminated? Well, the pregnancy. Well, what's the difference between a woman who's pregnant and a woman who isn't pregnant? Like, what's the difference? Like, why do you say terminate a pregnancy? What's the thing that makes someone pregnant? It's the presence of life inside of them, human life. Isn't that wrong to take human life? What do you think about that? Right? Kind of maybe phrase it that way. But you see how I just did that through like a bunch of questions, and I kind of led a little bit at the end, but that's the way you should try it.
you have determined that a child inside of a body, no, stay with me for a second, okay?
She's very good at that. I like that. She's being assertive. She's tends to get a little bit more trampled over a little bit throughout the conversation because he's very assertive, but that was very good of her. She's asserting her right to speak. I have a right to speak on this. Just hold on for a second, and she does it politely too. Like, that's very good. Good for her. Take that as a tactic to use in your conversations. If people are bulldozing over you, assert your right to speak. Just do it politely. Say, oh, don't, but just let me finish. You can even laugh it off if you don't want to make the other person a little uncomfortable, because you don't want to embarrass them. You're not trying to knock them down a bit, but you're just, just hold on. I'll let you speak. Just give me a second here, and smile, and they'll find that, hopefully persuasive enough to listen. So
You have determined within your realm that a woman has the right you've determined within your realm that if I determine that a woman has the right of what to do with her body, you've decided that I believe, and this is what you've decided I believe, is that no matter what, a woman has the right to murder a child. And this comes back once again to our core belief that we are disagreeing on, and that is where life begins. So
well, yes, that's exactly what you should be talking about. She is very good at bringing it back to the central point. The central disagreement we're having here is, what is a life? What's valuable? What's important? Who gets a right to life? That's what this entire conversation should be about. He should be leading the conversation back to that. And you're going to notice by the end of this conversation, she's not going to be convinced. No one's going to be convinced, because he's coming in antagonistic and he's trying to make his point. He needs to be thinking about what is speaking to her. So what are her points? And then next, what is the point of the conversation? She's good at that, at talking about those two things.
But you acknowledge when the boyfriend kills a child in the womb through RU-486, you said he should be charged with murder. So you fully acknowledged it was a human life.
What I acknowledge, and what I continue to acknowledge, is that a woman has the right to choose what happens to her body.
Do all women have the right to choose what happens to their bodies?
Absolutely.
Including the children in the womb then? Because 50% of them, actually plus 50% because they're sex selective abortion,
That's
are
true.
murdered. So clearly you don't think...
Okay, buddy, my guy, he thinks this is a win. This is not a win. Dude, don't ever say, oh my gosh, I'm for women's rights, but what about the women's rights in the womb? What about that? Dude, my guy, she looks at that as a clump of cells. She doesn't see that as a woman. She doesn't see that as a girl. Okay, it's a clump of cells to her. This is not the win you think it is. So you think this, buddy, you're not building rapport by doing that.
that all women have the right to choose what to do with their bodies, do you?
Because I don't believe, and I continue to, this is where we're continuing to come to a disagreement, is that the fetus in a body is not a human, is not a child until it is viable.
You completely contradicted yourself.
Again, my gosh, dude, just stick to what she's saying here. This is like, she is so much better at leading the conversation. It's not a person. That's basically what she means. It's not a person. Just ask her that. Clarify. Because a lot of, and this is something you'll notice with pro-choicers a lot, they don't really know how to express their views very well. They'll say, well, it's not a life. Well, okay, but what they mean by that oftentimes is it's not a person. They're willing to acknowledge, oh, okay, yeah, it's a living organism, sure, but I don't think it's a person. I don't think it's something valuable. All right, just lost my mic there for a second. Sorry, but anyway, yeah, that's what they mean. Dude, just stick to what does she mean. Press her on that. Ask her, what do you mean by viability? Like, why is that important to you? Dig into that.
It was about 5 minutes ago. You said if a boyfriend gives his girlfriend the abortion pill, he should be charged with murder. So you acknowledge it was.
Oh, dude, you're just. Oh, he's not listening. He's not listening. She just meant it was bad to drug her.
She
That's
meant
all
life.
he meant.
What I said earlier, what you backed me into a corner into saying earlier, because that's what a lot of this is you've been backing me into corners.
I'm just asking questions.
Is that if a boyfriend tries to override the choice of a woman, then he should be charged with something. Now, do I think it's murder? I don't know.
Well, it's premeditated, unjust killing of an innocent human being. By definition, that's murder. Also, when the mother does it, same thing, it's still murder. So why should a woman have a special right to murder her child?
A woman should not have a special right to murder her child.
But that's what you're arguing for.
Because a fetus is not a child. And I stand by
It is a
if a
child.
man...
Definition of child, son or daughter.
If a boyfriend, and I'm just going to clarify this for your little video that you're going to put on the internet somewhere. I'm going to clarify this for your video. If a boyfriend gives his girlfriend the abortion pill, then he should be charged with something. Do I believe it is murder? I don't know. I don't believe so. If it's
trespassing, jaywalking.
So if it's something.
Okay, he's making fun of her. He's smirking at her. Dude, this is not how you persuade people. This is not how you persuade people. And I get it. Like, if you're there to like make a show, if you're there to like do a speech, for example, to pro-life people, and you're trying to rile them up, and then there's someone at the end who has a question, and they go to the mic, and maybe you want to clown on them a little bit. Sure. I mean, we have fun on my channel too. If you're pro-life, we have a good laugh sometimes and talk about ridiculous things and all that. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But he's in a conversation with someone that he's invited them to sit down at. This is not a debate. This is not time for you to clown on the other person. This is a time for you to persuade them. Sometimes your intention is not to persuade. This is a time when it is.
Something where you are illegally giving someone, there's a lot of different medical negligence laws.
It's intentionally killing a human being.
But that's where we disagree. I don't believe that it's a human being.
You did like 7 minutes ago.
No. What I believed.
Also, it is a human being. If you Google right now, and I'll say this again, Google, when does human life begin scientifically? First word, fertilization.
Just because you want me to, let me do it.
Awesome. Fantastic.
Yep.
Look at
Google,
this.
when does human life begin scientifically? First word up, it's going to be fertilization. I'd like to see as well, just when you Google
Absolutely.
it.
Boom.
Fantastic.
It's so obnoxious.
So if we look at...
Hey, there it is.
It
Go
does
up.
say
Yep, it says fertilization, first word.
Okay, dude, you're acting like a kid here. And again, I respect what he does out there. I respect that he's out there. He's doing good stuff. And I'm not here to clown on him either. But I'm just saying, dude, you gotta turn that. Okay, it's obnoxious. It's first word, thumbs up the camera. Yeah, I totally owned the blue-haired feminist gender queer person. Yeah, look at that, dude. It's not helping. It's not helping. Please.
Now,
and it'll keep saying.
Let's continue. When does personhood begin?
See, personhood.
When does personhood begin?
Keep in mind, personhood. If you go back to when like the Equal Protection Act was put in.
Okay, he's going to talk about like legal personhood, which is a different conversation than what she's trying to talk about. She's trying to talk about philosophical personhood. So he wants to go on his big rant and show off how much he knows. Oh, look at that! The 14th Amendment that was ratified, and they said a person was this and that, and that may well be true. but that's completely irrelevant to the conversation. She's not talking about that kind of personhood. You should know this by now. You have done hundreds of these conversations. You should be well aware of this. And you're about to make a point that means absolutely nothing to her. All right.
Which was in like roughly like the 1850s or 1860s. It defined it as a man or woman. So that would include the child in the womb as well. So under the 14th Amendment right now, the Equal Protection Clause, we should all be being protected, including the preborn, from being murdered. So.
Okay, but she doesn't care about the 14th Amendment. She cares about the philosophy of personhood. So that would have been a perfect opportunity to start talking about that, but now we'll see where this goes.
You saw When Does Human Life Begin? It said fertilization. So you can't keep going back to it's not a human, because now you know it's a human. So why is it okay to murder a human in the womb?
It is not okay to murder a human in the womb. Now, don't interrupt me. I want you to just stop for like.
Do you see her? She's talking to him like she's a kid, you know. Oh, okay, no, Timmy, stop. But she's good at this. I mean, she's good. She's asserting her right to speak.
Like 30 seconds, okay? I stand by, and I continue to stand by. Human life may begin at conception, but personhood does not begin until a human is viable.
So who gets to decide who are persons and who aren't? For example, in the
That's good point, but then he starts going, for example, in the 1800s, okay, dude, just like, you don't need to go into the whole history lesson. Just say, who gets to decide who's a person, who's not? And just stop there. Just let it sit. You know, let that kind of marinate a little bit. Also, keep in mind, who would you rather be friends with? Because I'm going to tell you right now, Mac, I'd hang out with Mac any day. Hayden, I mean, I would hang out with him, but again, if you're an outsider, right? My point is, if you're an outsider watching this, who sounds more like they'd make the better friend? You know, who sounds more pleasant to be around? Hayden or Mac? I think we both know the answer to that, right? She's coming across much better rapport. All right.
1800s, people in America said, that's not a person, that's a black man. I can enslave him and kill him. Right now, you're dehumanizing people just like they did. Instead of dehumanizing black people, you're dehumanizing the children in the womb.
Let's back up.
Again, you notice how he's also saying, you this, you that, you're doing this and you're doing that. Ask in the form of a question. You know, say, do you think that's right? You know, kind of squint your eyes and kind of, yeah, tell your, you know, oh my goodness, are you sure? Like, do you think that's right? I don't know. I don't think that's okay. But it kind of sounds like that's the argument, isn't it? Right? And she'll say no, and then she'll be able to explain herself. But again, there's better ways of phrasing it.
Because what you are describing is racism and sexism and homophobia.
I'm describing dehumanization, which is what you're doing right now.
Exactly.
Which is a
what
good point.
I continue to come back to, and what you are continuing, and where our core belief disagrees with, is that the viability of human life, the viability that you believe, that you agree that a woman is required for a child to be born, correct?
Yeah, man and woman are both required.
Okay, awesome. So at our core belief, we agree on that we both, that you
She's
need
finding
sperm and
agreement,
you need eggs,
that's
and
good.
that creates a child. And how is a child carried to term?
Well, through the woman's body.
Okay, good.
Why is it fair
Fair. Hear that?
to expect a woman to carry a child to term and to continue to carry her to term, continue to give that child her body to survive? Okay, all right, let's continue that. So you agree with that, all that, right? You agree
She's
that
got to provide, I'll go even further. I'll say she has to provide a safe and healthy environment for her child to develop inside of her. So if she takes like Accutane, which is known to cause like birth defects, I think that's wrong. And I think that there should be like some charges there if
Awesome.
child comes out like birth defects or something.
Okay, cool. So let's continue along this path then. So when is a woman no longer responsible for her child?
I mean, generally, like as far as like what we go on in society right now, would basically be like 18. Like once a child like is 18, is legally an adult,
Okay.
she's not required to provide like, you know, food, housing, things like that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so if we continue along this path, so 18 is kind of when a child is no longer a mother's responsibility. That's
I'd say like Financially, I mean, obviously, like my position would be like biblically, parents are still supposed to like support their children as far as like teaching them to follow God's law, follow in God's commands, things like that. But obviously, like once a kid's like 21, it's still the son or daughter of whoever their parents are. Like that relationship doesn't end. However, like the financial responsibility may change after like 18.
Okay, all right. So following down this path, so what is a mother's responsibility? Let's say that she is in extreme poverty. And she is unable to care for her child at all. And this is a child that has already been born.
Okay, she's using a practicality argument, which I brought up earlier. Pro-choicers tend to use these. They're not good. They're not good. Right, well, what if she's poor? Can she kill, the kid? Well, okay, can you kill a kid outside of the womb, right? If that is a human being and she really does have a duty to care for it and keep it alive, then poverty, no poverty, doesn't matter, right? In terms of the ethical analysis. Now that might be important. I care about people in poverty. We want to help people in poverty, but we don't solve poverty by killing the children of those in poverty, right? We don't solve poverty by killing the impoverished, right? I mean, that is a way to solve it, but that's not an ethical way.
Abortion she decided she did not want to have an abortion.
Yep.
She decided that she was going to carry this child to term. She birthed it. The father is no longer in the picture for whatever reason.
Yeah. Let's say it was like a father, and let's say that like this father got the death penalty.
He said the R word. I had to bleep a lot of this. I didn't get to bleep it one time earlier. Stupid of me to miss that, but anyway, that's what they're talking about.
Which would be like my position for like saying she get the death
Lovely.
penalty.
Okay,
Yeah,
we
so
agree on that. Awesome.
Let's say
lovely. We agree on that one.
Okay, so did you hear that? He brought up the R word unnecessarily. Literally had nothing to do with what they were talking about. Somehow he fumbled himself into agreement. Apparently, he says, "Yeah, I think they should get the death penalty." The person who does that to someone, she agreed. She said, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess we agree on that. That's fantastic." And then he fumbles it again. Watch this.
She get the death penalty.
You should get the death penalty.
Hey, there we go. Not everyone agrees with that. Most people want to give the death penalty to the child, which you do too. But at least you want to also give it to the I don't think you should give it to the child, but.
Okay, do you see her face? I mean, it's just, dude, you just had rapport, you just had agreement, and then you ended it by attacking her again, right? Which again, it might be true, but just because it's true doesn't mean it needs to be said, right? You just had agreement, and now you can see her face. She's just like, oh gosh, okay.
Anyways, so all right, we agree on the bare minimum.
Death penalty. So we got that.
So let's say it's for some reason the father's no longer in the picture. I don't necessarily want to go down that whole path because that's a whole different
no worries.
realm of worlds.
Yep.
So she is in extreme poverty, can no longer care for the child. What is her responsibility to the child if she can no longer care for herself?
Yeah, so let's say that she's like, for example, someone else on a campus posed the question of like a homeless woman with like a baby, right? So let's say she's like a homeless woman with a baby. What should she do with the child? She should give the child to like an adoptive family. So in that case, she should pursue adoption. I'd point out like in terms of
I would just kind of disagree with him here, just on a point matter, not a persuasive matter, but like, although this is good persuasive power behind it, is I would say, well, she should go to a church, right? So now you're giving positive associations to churches, which is good. You want to do that with someone like this, of course, but that's probably the best answer, right? You don't tell a homeless woman with a baby, oh, you gotta give your child to an adoptive facility, something like that. No, you want to help her get out of poverty. That's what you want to do. You don't want to, well, we're going to just take your kid from you and then leave you on the street. Like what? No, that's no. But anyway, missed opportunity there, just in my opinion.
Adoption as far as newborns, like just to go to like the abortion, right? Because that's newborns, obviously. There are 36 waiting adoptive families for every one child that gets put up for adoption. Mm-hmm. Every newborn will pretty much get adopted. It's called domestic infant adoption. Child never enters foster care. Now, in the case of like a woman with like a newborn, like you're saying, right? If she's like homeless and in poverty, like in that case, the child's probably going to end up in foster care for a brief period of time because that's no longer domestic infant adoption at that point. Yeah. So the child would go into foster care for a period of time. Since it's like, let's just say it's like a 1-year-old or whatever, there's a pretty good chance that child would then get adopted out of the foster system because it's going in at an earlier stage. Mm-hmm. Like generally when we think of kids kids who like aren't getting adopted out of the foster care system. Usually it's like later stages. And actually in that case, there's a chance that she might actually have the possibility of reunification with the child. Like it wouldn't go necessarily directly into the adoption process. She might have like 6 months or something to go through like rehab if she's a drug addict or something like that to possibly get the child back.
Okay, so let's back that up then. Lovely. So you
Wow, that was long-winded. All you needed to say was she should go to a church. You know, we'd help her out. That would have sufficed. Instead, he went on a whole big spiel, which is fine. Like some of the stuff he said there was pretty good and important information, but just he really likes to talk about how much he knows. People don't want to listen to the know-it-all. Okay, and again, I'm not knocking him for being smart. He knows what he's talking about. But just, dude, whoa, we gotta slow it down. We gotta slow it down.
agree that if a mother is in extreme poverty, she should be able to give her child up for adoption.
Yes, but I'd point out that if like she's in extreme poverty and like adoption is not an option, she can't murder the child.
Absolutely. So let's back that up then. What are the options for a mother who is in extreme poverty, who has just been, let's say, raped, and has a fetus in her, is carrying a fetus, who is, let's say, 8 weeks?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same situation, right? Like I said, if adoption's not an option at that point, which it's not in the case of pregnancy until like after birth, right? If adoption's not an option.
Okay, so he's kind of he's answering her question literally. Here's another tip for you. So if you're in a conversation like this and someone asks you that question, pause for like a second and look the person in the eyes and say, you know what? That sounds like a really, really tough situation to be in. Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult that would be if someone was actually like going through something like that. That would be really difficult. And, you know, that's not lost on me. I would want to help someone like that. I would want to lead them to the church, you know, get them some help, you know, give them shelter, give them food, whatever they need. That being said, what I also think is true at the same time is that I don't think that, you know, we should solve suffering by killing the sufferer, right? And so what I'm saying is we need an ethical solution to something like that, not killing. Do you see how much more persuasive that sounded? Right? Did you hear that? Didn't that sound much better?
Option, she can't murder the child. Okay, now after she gives birth, if she wants to give that child up for adoption, she can do so. And in the case of domestic infant adoption, that child's highly likely to get adopted.
What do you propose if this mother cannot even feed herself and she's expected to carry a child to term? What do you expect this mother to do?
If she can't feed herself?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, if she can't feed herself, then she's going to die. So she's going to find a way to feed herself. Okay, there's homeless shelters, there's all those things. Okay, she'll be able to find food.
Okay, again, there's homeless shelters out there. You know, he's kind of making it sound like it's not his problem, right? And that might not be what he intends to convey, but again, that's how it sounds, right? Bring up the church. That would be a great opportunity. Again, it just might not be something that's coming to his mind, so I'm not going to hassle him about it, but it's just something that's a good opportunity, missed opportunity there.
Okay, and ultimately what she can't do, even if she can't feed herself, let's say, she can't murder her child still. Even if you're homeless, you have no food, and you're like on an island, let's say deserted island, no food, you can't then like stab yourself in the stomach or like take a pill to kill your child.
So
that's murder.
What I'm hearing you say, and what the...
You hear that? What I'm hearing. Now, usually you don't want to say what I'm hearing. You might want to, like, again, repeat their words to them. Like, okay, so, you know, it sounds like, you say things like that. Say, like, it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like, what you've conveyed is yada, yada, yada. Right? That's a little bit better than what I'm hearing. But what I'm hearing is still great. Like, building that rapport, building that empathy, and making the other person feel heard.
Core of your belief system seems to be is that if a mother cannot care for herself, she needs to prioritize the fetus in her, the non-viable fetus that she is carrying, that she never wanted, she never asked for, she needs to prioritize that fetus over her own.
Just real quick, all you're hearing from me is she can't murder the child. That's all you're hearing. I'm just saying can't murder her child. That's all I'm saying this whole time.
What you said is that she needs to find a homeless shelter. She needs to find a way to
Well, in
feed
this case, if
herself.
she doesn't have food, she's going to die. So yeah, her choices are either find food and like her and her baby lives, or she dies.
Let's say she can barely find enough to feed herself, and then the baby dies. What do you propose happens to this woman?
Once again, she can't intentionally kill her child. Like, let's say it's like a homeless woman on an island. There's no food, and she dies of starvation. Okay, like there's nothing she could have done. Now, if she's like, if she's a homeless and she like just decides to like kill her child because she's homeless, that's murder.
Okay, so what if she cannot feed herself? What if she can? What if
Then
she
she's
gets
going. Then she's going to die.
So she gets into a homeless shelter, which are already severely underrepresented, underprotected in this country, and she can barely. She's able to get enough food for herself, but her child dies due to malnourishment because she's getting enough to take care of herself, but her child passes away.
So again, like let's say like a woman on an island, I think is like a better example, right? And she doesn't have enough.
Okay, all you need to say is that wouldn't be her fault. Again, he uses these long-winded answers, you know. Just say that wouldn't be her fault. That would be a really tragic thing if something like that happened.
Food, right? And the child dies because she's not getting enough calories. That's not intentionally killing the child. If she's doing everything she can to try to get enough food, and she can't get enough food, and the child naturally dies as a result of her not being able to get enough food, okay, that's a natural death. That's different from intentionally killing the child through abortion, right? So a woman in like a homeless shelter, if she like can get enough food to support her and her child, which she can, like let's be honest, people in America, they can go to homeless shelters, they can have enough food to support them and their child. The child doesn't take that much calories. They're like, you know, not that big. So she can survive. She can't intentionally kill her child though, right? Woman who can't get like enough food or whatever, doesn't mean she can then murder her child by taking an abortion pill or by getting a D&E abortion and ripping the child apart limb by limb. You can't intentionally murder a child just because you don't have enough food.
So what I'm continuing to hear is that a woman does not have the right to choose. She has the right to do everything she can to protect.
Hang on, just real quick. You keep using this.
Gosh, dude, she's just trying. She's telling you how you're coming across, and you're not listening. You're not listening. We're on the home stretch here. We're like just like a minute or two, just a few left of this video, but my goodness, this guy, he needs some help on this. Again, he's doing good work, like being out there, but he needs to learn some of this.
Euphemism of right to choose. It's choosing to do what? Murder the child. I'm saying women can't murder their child. That's what I'm saying.
So she does not have the right to. She doesn't have the right to. I'll use your words for you. She doesn't have the right to murder the fetus because it's not a child, because it is not viable outside of the.
Again, definition of child, son or daughter. That's from fertilization. You already saw when human life begins as fertilization. So you know it's a child. You know it is a child.
There's a different conversation about what a child is.
Dude, he's just wow. He's really pressing it. He needs to match her energy. That would be a good policy. Match that person's energy. Right? She's being calm. He's going a million miles per hour.
And what human life.
Do you want to look
is.
up definition of child? Because it'll say son or daughter.
Correct.
Which is from fertilization.
No.
So it's a child. Yes.
Okay,
You saw when
right,
human life
let's go
begins
back.
as fertilization.
Son or daughter. Let's go back to son or daughter then.
Okay.
Let's do that. So when do sex organs begin to appear in a child?
About 9 weeks, but guess what?
Oh,
Even from fertilization before sex organs, it's still a son or a daughter. It's based on chromosomes.
Okay, awesome. So let's talk about XXX chromosomes.
People who are intersex.
Let's not. Please.
Intersex.
Now we're getting.
or
I don't
they
think we
have-
should. Just real quick. I don't think we should kill people who are intersex in the womb.
Oh,
either.
absolutely not. Yes. So intersexuality, whatever. So let's go back to this boy or girl, son or daughter conversation that we're having
If
here.
someone is
And
intersex, they're also
people.
a child.
Absolutely. So let's say that let's say a child is a non-viable child. So even outside of the womb, for some reason
Okay.
they are short. Let's say they're short 3 chromosomes and they are a non-viable child.
Some birth defect will they'll die shortly after they're born
Exactly.
or something.
Do you support abortion in those situations?
No, because even though like a child may die naturally of natural causes like a sickness or an illness or a birth defect, that doesn't mean that we can then intentionally murder them. For example, there are people, live in hospitals right now who may only have like 6 months to live because of cancer or because of some natural thing. That doesn't mean that we can then go stab them and kill them. In the same way, a child in the womb, even though after birth it may only survive for say like 3 months or like 2 days or 2 hours or whatever, just because they'll die naturally doesn't mean that we then have the right to go intentionally murder them.
Okay. So let's say, so what you were saying is that a woman, because
Men can't get pregnant.
Way
yeah.
back we discovered
Unhelpful.
we settled on that a person with a uterus, because I'm a person with a uterus who's not identified as a woman. Let's say a person with a uterus. So you expect a person with a uterus to carry a child who is not viable, who they know is not viable, to term?
Yeah, because they can't murder the child. Just like let's say like they know the child will die, let's say 3 months after birth, right? Doesn't mean you get to then murder the child. Just because the child will die naturally doesn't mean that we have the choice to then murder them. For example, there are people who will die like, you know, in 10 days because of cancer or something. We can't go stab them to death.
Correct, but what we're saying is you expect a person with a uterus, a woman, to go through the trauma of not only giving birth to a child that they know is going to pass away very soon, but to also go through the trauma of watching that child slowly die in front of them.
Look at his face. She is fantastic at her emotionally reframing the issue. Did you hear that? That was incredible. Now, again, I disagree with her, but that was incredible on her part. Here I would respond with an analogy from Stephanie Gray. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but essentially she basically makes the point through questions, right, and a thought experiment of we seem to think that the less time we have with someone, the more valuable we need to make the time we have with them that's left, right? If you know, she says, imagine you had like a long lost uncle that you never knew about, or I don't know, something like that. Or let's say, yeah, you had an uncle that you knew, but you hadn't seen him in forever. And you just found out he was diagnosed with cancer and he has a month to live, maybe 3 weeks, a week even. And you have the chance to go and see him. Wouldn't you want to maximize the time you had with him in that week? Wouldn't you want to fly over and spend time with him rather than say, well, pull the plug now? It's too much, right? Again, there's a better way of kind of making the analogy, but that's kind of the gist of it, right? That would be a decent response.
That's what you want for women in this world?
Because the alternative is murdering the child.
Oh my gosh, dude. It's so painful to listen to. That's what you want for women in this world? Because of murdering a child. Just bulldozes over the entire thing. Dude, please stop. Stop. It's hurting me.
All I'm saying is you can't murder the child.
No, what you're saying is you want women to take a non-viable pregnancy, and you want them to go through the trauma.
Technically,
and
technically it will live for 10 days after. So you're just like, let me ask you this, okay? Because your position clearly is that.
Gosh, it's so painful to listen to. He's not listening to her at all. She's trying to paint this really like somber scenario that like really speaks to her. She's like, what about this person? This is so awful. And well, no, like, what about 10 days after? No. Dude, stop. Please stop. It's not helping.
She should be able to kill. That's clearly your position, right? Yes. So how long would it need to live after before you're like, well, I guess your position is you can kill them no matter how long they live after. But I'm just pointing out, like, it seems quite arbitrary that you're saying, like, because a child will die later naturally, which all of us will die later naturally at some point, right? We can then kill them in the womb. I'm saying, no, you can't murder someone because it's murder and God commands us not to do it, right? So killing a child in the womb, even if they'll die of natural causes 10 days after they're born, you still can't murder them because it's murder.
What I continue to come back to, and this is kind of going to be my last point, I have to get off to class.
And
I want to start by thanking you for
a very, this has been a great,
again, even while she's thanking him, he's interrupting her, probably unintentionally, but still, you know, she's just trying to say thank you, and he's like, yeah, very civil. Dude, just let her thank you and say thank you. You know, just you don't need to be so hyper.
Been a great conversation. I'm going to continue to come back to a woman has the right to decide what's going to happen to her body.
Do all women have that right?
Yes, all women have that right,
including the women in the womb.
But I continue.
Oh my goodness! Just look at the smirk on his face. Look at that. Look at his face. Oh my gosh! Oh. It's so bad. Oh, dude! Even the women in the womb. Dude, please stop. No more.
We need to come back to that life is not life until life, while human life may begin at fertilization,
he is trying to win points. He's not trying to win the person. that's what we want to do.
Personhood of a human does not begin until the first breath, until viability outside of the womb. And what I continue to come back.
Okay, did you hear that? Just the entirety of the conversation meant nothing. She is now at the end back at square one. She is leaving this conversation literally no different than when she started. He could have changed around at least one of those points, or at least softened something. He's made no progress at all. And he posts this on YouTube as if it's a win, which, I mean, again, I understand, not every conversation is going to be a win. And that's fine. I have videos where maybe I regret, I'm like, oh, yeah, I could have done that better. Definitely. Absolutely. There are videos like that. Like my last live stream was, it got pretty popular, but I don't know, people didn't seem to resonate with it. It kind of went to the wrong audience. It wasn't really for the audience that it went to. But sometimes that's YouTube, but some of it's me, So I have stuff to work on too. I wish the best of luck to Hayden, but I mean, he's just, oh my gosh, we're almost done here. But if you're finding this valuable, please subscribe. Check out my other content. It's a little more fun. This is a really serious video. I've got a lot of fun live streams I've done and some other really good videos. So at least take a peek. Just take a peek at, All right, let's finish.
Back to, as a woman has the right to choose what happens to her body until viability. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate you sitting down.
Thank you very much. Yep. Have a good day.
You too.
All right. So that's the end of that video. And just as we wrap up, if you want me to analyze, and hopefully it'll be a little more fun when we do these ones, but if you want me to analyze Steven Crowder's Change My Mind segments on this, or on any topic really, or Jeff Durbin's On the Street videos, he does some really good stuff. I think they both do better jobs than Hayden does. Again, I applaud Hayden. He's getting out there. That's really good. He's having the conversations. Most people aren't even doing that. So he's a doer, which is good. Get out there and do it. But hopefully, if Hayden ever watches any of this, he can pick up some of the tips on just how to build better rapport, how to empathize, how to mirror, how to recognize body language and facial expressions, how to use your own body language and facial expressions is very good. Repeating back to people what they're saying, making sure that they feel heard. We learned about emotionally reframing the conversation. We learned about not talking so fast, slowing it down. We learned about not being obnoxious and claiming a victory and not interrupting, and making sure that, again, people feel heard. That's probably the most important lesson we learned today. We learned about not bringing up unnecessary points, like the R word when that's not needed in there, and not using words that are going to trigger people, even if it's totally okay to say, like, the blacks. He says the blacks. Okay, like, dude, your counterpart doesn't like that. Don't say that, please, for crying out loud. Not, oh my goodness, how much more? Not bulldozing, not bullying people into a point, not acting like a cross-examiner, but actually acting like a person, like just talking, not acting like a search engine, right? Where you just, let me give this really long-winded history of the abolitionist movement. Nobody needs that. Nobody needs that. It's important to you, but it's not important to them, which is, of course, the other final point we want to make here. Speaking to other people's interests, not speaking to your own. So if you found that valuable, like and subscribe. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I'll catch you on the next one. Love you guys, and get out there and let's persuade some people. All right, take care.